Hey everybody, welcome back to Plot Twist. Sorry it's been so long. I've been having some technical issues. Still having them, but hopefully that'll get all sorted out here fairly soon. But anyway, so today I have a new book review for you. I'm reviewing A Brother by Anaya Alborn. I'm really hoping I'm saying that right. And this is a horror book set in the early 80s, late 70s. This book follows primarily two brothers, Michael Morowe and Reb Morowe, also known as Ray Morowe. These two brothers have an interesting lifestyle. They live out in the middle of the woods in the Appalachian Mountains. And this is about a time when serial killers in America were running pretty rampant. The book mentions John Wayne Gacy and Ted Bundy, and the Morrows are actually part of that statistic as well. So this is a family of murderers. Primarily it's the mother that does all the murdering. She has a fascination with young women, young blonde women in particular. So she usually has her husband and her son Ray bringing in the kids, or bringing in the girls, I should say. She dispatches them, and then it's Mike's job to then take care of the bodies. Mike does not like this job at all. He doesn't really care for it, but he actually doesn't know any other way because he's been raised by this family. And his sister, Misty Dawn, also dislikes it, but she's kind of just thrown into the shadows most of the time. And that's because Mom actually kind of hates her, and it's mostly because she resembles her at a younger age. Mama seems to have an issue with women in general. So Misty Dawn is treated very poorly, while Ray and Michael tend to get everything, at least as much as a poor family out in the boonies can provide. And they talk about a living life, or living off of the land, and what that provides. And then it's also mentioned that the girls are part of the land, so they are what the land provides. And that is also part of Michael's job, is to prepare them in that fashion.
When can I come over for dinner?
It's an incredibly interesting book, and the book centers around these two brothers, and Reb, or Ray, he prefers to be called Reb, as in rebel. He has a lot of anger in him, and it's seen throughout the book, where it goes flashbacks to their early childhood and how he and Michael first began their interactions. And it shows Reb's thinking from there. So it's clear that when he was a very small child, he was already into the family business, quote unquote. And Michael was just very different about it. Ray takes Michael to town one day, which is a very rare event. Usually they don't go into town very often. If they do go anywhere, it's usually to find a mark. And then things go from there. So Michael is very excited to go out. He's excited to see the town. And I wouldn't say he's neurodivergent. In particular, I would just say he's highly uneducated, because he's never actually gone to school. So his knowledge is very limited. And in that way, he's still very childish throughout the entire book, because he's never really gotten a chance to grow up. He had to start hunting for the family at a very young age. So they go into town, and then Reb takes them to a record store, and there Michael meets Alice. Alice is a young, dark-haired woman. She just lights up his world immediately. He's very attracted to her. He likes her a lot. She draws comics, and he loves that. But he can't bring her home. He knows that he can't do anything with her because of what his family does. He knows that it's wrong what his family does. He just doesn't see any way out of it, which is totally acceptable. Not the greatest thing in the world, but it's hard for him to understand right from wrong in that sense. So he begins to form this relationship with Alice, while Ray is simultaneously having a relationship with Lucy, who also works at the record shop and is also actually Alice's roommate. So these two live together, and so the brothers are kind of starting up relationships. They go on dates. Mostly, though, what happens is Ray comes to the record shop. Alice mans the counter while Lucy and Ray man the closet. Or man the storage closet. So that leaves Alice alone with Michael, and as Michael opens up to her more and more, he realizes that she's falling for him more, and as that happens, he falls for her more. So the book follows this dilemma, and it's actually really kind of intense, because you never really know when the secret is going to drop. And by the end of the book, it's harrowing what happens. So it's a really great book dealing with moral dilemmas. And especially in terms of Michael, who does not like what's happening. He knows it's wrong. He knows that it's not fair to these women that are being brought in all the time. And on that note, too, while this relationship is happening between him and Alice and Ray and Lucy, they're also seem to be following this mark. But there's something a little bit different about this mark. They keep watching her at a house, which is not something that the family normally does. Normally they're picking up hitchhikers or vagabonds, people who wouldn't be missed necessarily, but fit Mama's urges, is what they call them. So there's something really different. She has a home, which likely means that she has family and friends that would notice her missing. And yes, while they live in a small town and it's out in the boonies and, you know, nobody comes around very often, it's still, this is a person that would not normally be in the mark. And she's also older as well. So Michael contests this a little bit. He tells Ray that this isn't a good mark, this isn't one that Mama would like, this isn't one that would be approved. But Ray tells him to essentially shut up. And that's the dynamic between these two brothers. It's mentioned in the book that Michael doesn't belong to the Morrows as a son. He belongs to Ray. He is Ray's property. And it's kind of how he's been raised, and it's how he sees himself, and it's definitely how Ray sees him. So Ray definitely sees him as you are my underling, you do as I say. It doesn't matter what Mama says, it doesn't matter what Dad says, you do what I say. So, he tries to argue with his brother, but every time he does, he's met with Ray's anger and ire, and Ray lashes out at him. He hits him a few times, and things kind of just spiral from there. So I don't want to get too far into the book because then a lot of spoilers tend to happen, and as the pieces fall into place, you just kind of notice more and more of what's going on. And that's one of the great things I like about this book, is that the pieces just kind of fall into place, and you can see where it's going, but you don't know how it's going to get there. Which is what I really like, and which is something that I find very fun about a lot of books. People always talk about, like, oh, I saw the twist coming a mile away. And yeah, sure, you know the twist that's coming throughout the book. It's hinted at, for one thing, and it's built up throughout the entire series, and it's built up throughout the entire book, and so you know what's going to happen, in a sense, but the journey is the important part there. And I think that's something that not a whole lot of people remember, is, sure, you can see the twist coming, and you can have a great twist, but you also have to remember the journey. So, you know, the ending isn't the end game. It's the whole novel. Otherwise, they would just write the ending, and that would be it. So yeah, this is a great book. Beautiful descriptions. All the characters are really interesting as well. Even Mama and Wade, which is the father/husband in this thing. The whole family is just messed up. They have a set of grandparents, which is Mama's parents. They are horrible people as well. They talk about a older sister that they used to have, named Laura Lynn, and how she went to go live with the grandparents because she mouthed off to Mama at one point. And they talk about that as well, and they have not seen her since. So I won't say what happened to her, but I'm sure you can start filling in blanks there as well. But yeah, so it's a great novel about killers, which is not something that should be great in all that sense. But the characters are so beautifully done. They're very dynamic. You can relate to all of them, which is really hard to do for serial killers in a lot of sense. But they have such human emotions, and they have such human events in their lives that you can go, oh yeah, I remember I did something like that too. And so you understand where they're all coming from. You understand their upbringing, things like that. So I loved it quite a bit. It was just beautiful. It was jarring. I don't want to say predictable in like a bad way. It wasn't predictable like that, but it was predictable in the sense that you would just go, oh no, because you know what's happening, but the characters don't, and it's reasonable that they don't. Michael was definitely a very interesting character. Like I said before, he didn't have a whole lot of opportunities at education, so his mindset is still very childish, even though he's about 19 at the beginning of this book. So he comes across very naive, very teenager-like almost in some cases. But he also looks up to Ray, and Ray is this very chaotic, harsh, unpredictable, wild person, and poor Michael is just trying to, stay one step ahead of him, stay one step in his good graces the entire time. One of the things that I like about Michael a lot is that he struggles with human interaction, but not in the sense that a killer would. It's in the sense that he wants the connections, but he doesn't know how to obtain them. He wants normal connections. He wants to have a girlfriend and go out on dates with her. He wants to have a brother that they just go off and do stupid crap together, that he can be best friends with. But he doesn't know how to initiate those reactions, and he's trying to get them from a family that would never be able to mimic those actions as well. So he's very in a dilemma, I would say. And that's a really unique character to have a book about, too. Normally those type of characters are side characters, or they end up becoming villains in a way. And Michael's journey is he teeters on the edge quite a bit. And that's what I love. And at the end of it, it's kind of morally ambiguous as to which way he ended up landing. Ray is also a very interesting character. You can see where he's coming from in terms of his anger and his rage. And maybe if he had a normal family, for one thing. Well, if he had a normal family, none of this would have happened. But if he had somebody that he could go to, if he had like a teacher that he could talk to about it, or somebody like a counselor, anything, he might not have turned out the way he did. Which I know could be said for most killers, but in Ray's particular stance, you can see where the lines fall in that. You can see every step of the way, like, oh, if he had just talked to somebody here, if he had just said something here, if he had just gone away here, you can see where each little piece fell into place for him. Mama, she tends to just kind of stay the same throughout the whole thing, but she's a very interesting character as well. So even though she doesn't have much of an arc throughout this whole thing, it's not really expected that she would. She's older, she's set in her ways, she's been doing this a long time, and she doesn't see a way out, and she doesn't want a way out. This is just what she does, and this is how she copes with her own upbringing. So, but she's very interesting because she clearly loves her two sons. At least in the sense that she provides for them, she makes sure that they're alright, essentially. But she's also very distant as well. It almost seems like she had a family because she felt like she needed to. In a way, like she just felt like it was expected. And so she kind of chose the family that would let her take care of her urges without much interruption, without any backlash. And that's where Wade comes in, Wade being the father. He is a Vietnam vet, and he clearly has some PTSD from Vietnam. He's always talking about stories from there. Sometimes he'll have little episodes where he just kind of goes away a little bit mentally. And that's kind of another part of the thing, too. He's very distant. He's a very distant character. He says very few words. If he does say anything at all, it's usually teaching the boys some life lessons. You know, the typical father stuff, like here's how you gut a squirrel or something. Here's how you skin a rabbit. Here's how you shoot a gun. Here's how you do this. Here's how you work on cars. So he does that in a fatherly sense, but he's also very distant too. He tends to stay in his own mind. And that's something that both the parents do quite often. They just stay in their own heads and interact with the children as much as they believe they need to interact with. Except, of course, with Misty Dawn. Now, Misty Dawn, she's a very complicated character as well. She's young, she wears a lot of dresses, but she's never really allowed to leave the house. And she's older than Michael. I think she's like in her 20, 23 area, somewhere around there. So she's not allowed to leave the house. She's not really allowed to have anything. She has a record player, and she plays music all the time, but that's really about it. That's all she has. And she resents Michael a lot for being able to go out and do things. But she also cares deeply for Michael as well. She really likes Michael. She doesn't like the way he's treated in the family. She doesn't like the family to begin with. So there is that. And she just kind of... She was what I would definitely call a wallflower, in a sense. She's just kind of plastered up against there. She's very pretty. She's very nice. She's great to talk to. But she's just kind of left behind. And Michael does a lot of the things that he does for her sake. He does everything he can to keep Mama's anger off of her, because she looks exactly like the type of mark that Mama would go after. And he knows it's just a matter of time before she goes after her own daughter, that she clearly doesn't like. So then that brings us over to Alice and Lucy. Lucy we don't get to know too well. She's just Ray's girlfriend, in a sense. That's all she really is. They interact quite a bit. She's a nice girl. She's very fun. She's got a little bit of a wild side, a little bit of a troublemaker side, but that's nothing to falter over. It's just part of her. And Alice is this wonderful young girl. She talks about wanting to leave Virginia really badly. She wants to go out. She wants to see New York, which is something that Michael wants as well. He wants to be able to leave and go to New York, and so they bond over that. But they know neither of them can leave, and they can't leave for various reasons. But family does seem to be the motivator for both of them, even though the reasoning is very different for both of them. All these characters together are very interesting in the sense that they're very human, and they're very normal people in a sense. But then these things just happen, life just happens to them. And you can just see how easy it is for people to fall into this dark side of themselves. Michael is constantly worried that he's become this monster because of what he has to do in order to stay within the family. And then he wonders if he likes it, and he wonders if things like that happen to him. And I think it's something that every killer has probably thought of. Maybe not in that sense, but maybe in a different sense as well. And it's really interesting to see how easy that question can be answered, even though it's a tough question. You see how Ray answered that question. You see how Mama answered that question. You see how Wade answers that question. And Michael is still asking that. And I really liked that sense of the book. I like that it showed you different ways that question could be answered. And it also does, like I say, bring up Bundy and Gacy, where we know how they answered that question. It was not good at all. So the writing is very wonderful as well. It's very reminiscent of your typical 80s slasher flick almost, and it's very reminiscent of Stephen King. Actually gets brought up to mind quite a bit, which I know Stephen King's kind of a cliche name at this point, but it does remind me of his work in that sense, where it's just very matter of fact in terms of what is happening. The environment is very well thought out. It's clear that the author probably either did a lot of research about small towns in Virginia or lived in one. I don't know her history all that much, but it's clear that she understands how life is there, and especially in the 70s and 80s, when we didn't really think about what our neighbors were doing. We didn't think about what our neighbors did in the night. We just assumed they were people, and murderers and things like that. That was somewhere else. That somebody else did that, not in our town. That kind of thing. But it is very much in their town. It's just a wonderful book. I loved all the characters. Michael definitely being my favorite. I loved Michael a lot. He was just so complex, even though he was not a complex guy. I'll tack this on as just a little thing here. Whoops. So I have updated the blanket. I am all caught up now. I won't unfold this completely. But yeah, so we're doing pretty good. Brother is this one? Yeah, this one I think. And then I've obviously got a couple more books that I could talk about here pretty soon. But yeah, so I've got Brother on there now, and I've got 3 more to go through. But yeah, the blanket is coming along, and it's doing very well. And it's a little concerning, because it's not really all that long just yet. And we're well halfway through the year. But I'm hoping, I have a lot of smaller reads that I'm planning on doing soon, so I'm hoping that will give me something to pad the blanket up with. That is it. So thank you so much for coming, like I said, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and keep reading.